Welcome to LSVT Global's virtual on-demand SLP mini conference. This presentation is Enhanced Solutions for Voice and Mobility Maintenance Classes, Virtual Discoveries in PD Care. This webinar is brought to you by LSVT Global, where we have innovation in science and integrity in practice. On-demand viewing of this webinar is available for self-report CE activity. The on-demand version of this webinar is not ASHA or state registered for CEUs for speech, physical, or occupational therapy professionals, but it may be used for self-reported CEU credit as non-registered, non-pre-approved CEU activity. That is, the credit can count towards your CE maintenance progress if you choose to self-report your activity. Request a certificate by emailing webinars@lsvtglobal.com after you have viewed the on-demand webinar in full, or forward the post-webinar email that you will receive for your certificate request. After your attendance has been verified, we will email you a certificate of completion, which will include your name, date of the webinar, and the number of hours earned. It may take 1 to 2 weeks for certificates to be emailed. Attendance for the full webinar is required to earn your certificate. Licensing requirements for CEUs differ by state. Check with your state licensing board to determine if your state accepts non-ASHA registered or non-pre-approved CEU activities. For more information on including non-ASHA registered CEUs for certification maintenance, please visit ASHA's website that's listed here. Completion of the on-demand viewing of this webinar will not be reported to the ASHA CE registry by us and cannot be added to the ASHA CE registry by you. It will be your responsibility to retain documentation of completion, just as you do with any other non-registered CE activity. All clients shown in videos during this presentation have given their consent for their videos to be used for educational purposes. Any copying of videos or viewing outside of this webinar is strictly prohibited. And we thank you for respecting the contribution of these clients for allowing their videos to be shared. Please enjoy the webinar. First of all, some quick introductions. My name is Cynthia Fox. I'm LSVT Global CEO and one of the co-founders, and I'll be moderating and one of the presenters. And while we have our cameras on, I'll also introduce you to Angela Halpern. She's our Chief Clinical Officer of LSVT LOUD and will be a presenter today. And Laura Gousset, who is our LSVT BIG Chief Clinical Officer and will also be presenting today. And now for the show. So again, Enhanced Solutions for Voice and Mobility Maintenance Classes will really highlight some of our virtual discoveries and pivots that we've made in Parkinson's disease care. Pivots that were always on our long-term, probably list of things we'd like to do, and certainly were accelerated due to COVID-19, as many virtual opportunities have been for all of us. Once again, Angela, Laura, and myself, Cynthia, are your presenters for today. I gave a brief introduction of who we are, but you have in your slides and in your handout a more detailed description of who we are, but we're all have been with LSVT Global for many, many years delivering treatment. We're faculty for both LSVT LOUD and LSVT BIG courses. Angela and Laura developed the LOUD for Life and LSVT BIG training courses and also are leaders of these types of classes. Disclosures, all three of us have financial and non-financial relationships with LSVT Global. Non-financial include a preference for LSVT LOUD and LSVT BIG as treatment techniques. Myself, I'm an employee of LSVT Global, receive lecture honorarium and have ownership interest. Laura and Angela are employees of LSVT Global, receive lecture honorarium and travel reimbursement. And with that, I will now turn the microphone over to Angela.
Great, thank you. Well, let's start off first with what we hope to achieve in this next hour with you today. By the end of the presentation, you should be able to define what are voice and movement maintenance exercise classes for people with Parkinson's disease, explain 4 key logistical components of these virtual, the move from in-person to virtual voice and movement exercise classes. And so we'll go through things like platforms, how to verify if people have had LSVT, brief overview of the class structure, different types of activities, how you can track progress and outcomes. And then most exciting is to hear feedback from people who have participated in virtual LOUD and Big for Life classes. As for life instructors of these classes, we all frequently say that teaching these classes is one of the highlights of our week. The wisdom that we get from the class participants as they share in the camaraderie that's really developed is really heartwarming. And I think you'll see that coming through in these comments that we review towards the end. So to start with, we're just going to give a brief overview to lay the foundation. What are LSVT LOUD and LSVT BIG in a nutshell? Well, they're intensive, amplitude-based exercise therapy programs for both the speech and the limb motor systems. But they're unique in that we're not just targeting the motor system, but equally important, we're retraining the sensory motor system. So these treatments directly target the deficits that we see in Parkinson's disease of hypokinesia, that reduced amplitude of movement, and bradykinesia, slowness of movement. And we do that by increasing amplitude, so increasing loudness, LSVT loud to normal loudness, increasing the amplitude of movement with big movements, LSVT big. They're based on principles of neuroplasticity, things such as intensive practice, saliency, complexity that are important for long-lasting change. And the programs are extensively and heavily based on research. So when your patients receive these treatments, they can have confidence that they're participating in something that's evidence-based, and they know that that rationale for the treatment is well supported. Let's touch a little bit more on this neuroplasticity principle of intensity. With the LSVT programs, each protocol, LSVT LOUD and LSVT BIG, are delivered 4 days a week consecutively for 4 weeks. Everyone is assigned daily home practice every day of that month and carryover activities. So the goal is always taking what they learn with the therapist to the real world and establishing a lifelong habit of practice, which is going to be an important foundation as we get into talking about maintenance. So we see intensity of treatment is really key to motor learning and neuroplasticity. And this intensity is a good thing. So you don't do shorter sessions, fewer times a week because it's easier, more convenient. We want to do what's based on solid principles so we can see these long-lasting changes. When we look at LSVT BIG and LSVT LOUD, our goal for individuals who participate is that they will use their bigger movements and louder voice automatically in their everyday life. So they're taking what we have trained in the treatment session and generalizing it to their real world, to their function, to have improved quality of life and for the long term. And we have data to support these long-term outcomes for people when they have this increased amplitude usage. We like to look at LSVT LOUD and LSVT BIG as a lifelong model. I tell my patients when they start treatment with me that they're stuck with me forever and ever, amen. And this has always been a part of how we have approached this from the beginning of time. So what happens is people start with LSVT LOUD or LSVT BIG, the core treatment, getting that 1 month of intensive treatment that I just described. And throughout that, we're training them in that daily self-practice. So they're doing their LSVT exercises outside of the treatment room, so that becomes a lifelong habit. When they finish treatment, then that's established, and we say, now we want you to continue practicing those exercises daily to maintain. We have also always talked about and encouraged this idea of group practice, and this will be the topic we'll get into in a bit more of these LOUD for Life and Big for Life classes. And then we also encourage scheduled tune-ups. So we encourage our LSVT certified therapists to check in with the people that they have worked with every 3 to 12 months, depending on the severity and the individual client. So there's a continuum of independence with some support through groups to that more intensive follow-up with the therapist. Some patients frequently might ask questions about, well, what do I do after I finish the treatment? I see these great outcomes. What can I do to continue to practice and keep those up? Will I be able to keep it up? How can I keep myself motivated? Or they may say, well, I already do a lot of other types of exercise. I sing, I box, I go to workout class. Isn't that enough? Well, the response is that it's not enough. We need to do treatments that are focused on the LSVT exercises as well. And let's set a foundation for that as we go through these next slides. Clinically, one of the challenges many people with Parkinson's face following therapy is how to maintain those treatment effects over time and keep exercising. They're not regularly going to therapy, so they don't have that one-on-one seeing that therapist to push them. Maybe their disease is progressing. They might have other medical issues, complications that create barriers to exercise. They might have this feeling of, I'm doing pretty well, I don't need to do this anymore, and not realizing that maybe they're not exercising with the same intensity or using the same bigness or loudness that they need to be using. Lack of motivation. I think this is one we can all personally relate to when we're trying to keep up with our exercise routines. Sometimes we just need to mix it up and do something a little bit different to keep us motivated. And then there's that sensory impairment impacting quality of practice, which relates back to the comment I was making previously of sometimes they may not be able to tune into, is this the right amount of loudness? Is this the right amount of bigness that I need to be using? Then we need to look at, if we want to help people continue to exercise, what are motivators? What can we do as therapists to create environments and situations to enable and help our clients to be more motivated to exercise? When we look to the literature, motivations for exercise are listed here. So exercise must be something that has purpose and meaning. People need to be able to see, well, if I do this, then it helps people understand me. If I do this, then it helps me be able to move better. Enhancing self-efficacy. They get that success. They get that empowerment so they can continue to do more. They can operate in their environment with more safety and confidence. When we look at these principles of neuroplasticity, perhaps could these exercises intensively be slowing some symptom progression? And then when you talk to people, what are the things, if they're going to a class that they want that social engagement. They talk about how important it is to have instructors who are motivating and encouraging. And then we all like to have some fun when we're doing it, when these activities can be incorporated into the core principles. Next slide. So while regular intensive exercise is very important, we don't want to negate that, it does not replace a daily dose and the need for that daily dose of LSVT LOUD or LSVT BIG. Both are needed. So we say combine those for success. And we encourage this in the people that we work with as well. Why? Why do we need to have things that are more specifically related to LSVT BIG or LSVT LOUD? Well, if we go back to the core concepts of what LSVT treatments are based on, we have this idea of target. So with LSVT treatments, we're directly targeting that hypokinesia by increasing amplitude across the motor limb system or motor speech system. Other exercise programs don't necessarily have that specific focus. When we look at the mode, as I mentioned, LSVT treatments are intensive. They're high effort based on principles of neuroplasticity. This is what we need for long-lasting change. Not all other exercise programs have that intensity across the spectrum. So we need intensity in terms of this amplitude and for movement, balance, endurance, the strength, the complexity. And then that idea of the sensory calibration. So with the LSVT programs, we're continuing in their daily practice, in groups, and the other things that we do to bring that kinesthetic awareness of that sensory mismatch, helping people to independently, internally cue the level of loudness or the level of bigness that they need to be using, helping them to see, no, that voice isn't too loud when you talk like that. No, your movements are not too big. And so continuing with that recalibration is important through those programs. So this brings us to our first objective of discussing LOUD for Life and BIG for Life, which are group exercise maintenance classes specifically for people who have already completed the full LSVT LOUD or LSVT BIG protocol. With these classes, they're typically community-based, and this first introduction I'm going to give when we were doing these classes in person, and then keeping in mind that we will be talking about this shift to making these virtual. So community-based, led by LSVT BIG, LSVT LOUD certified therapists who are acting as fitness professionals in this situation because it's leading an exercise class, it's not therapy. Most of these are cash-based or donation-based. Some are run through hospital organizations, some are run through Parkinson's support groups, but they're not therapy. They're not billed as therapy. When we look at the goals for these classes, what we hope to achieve, these goals are derived from the ideas that I presented back on that slide about the motivators for exercise. So what's going to motivate people and help to enhance their quality of life with these classes? The primary goal, let's get them support for that regular practice of their LSVT LOUD and LSVT BIG exercises so they can and use those in their daily life. So extra motivation to practice in a new and fun way. We also want to provide that social interaction that's so important. This idea of being in a class with other people who understand what it feels like, that when you feel like you're shouting, people are saying, no, that voice is within normal limits. Or when you feel like you're moving too big, they're saying, nope, that just looks normal. Reducing care partner burden. So the individuals have a class to go to, takes some burden off the care partner, gives that enhanced motivation to relieve the care partner of some of those responsibilities. This idea of general wellness, overall wellness and well-being, and then again, providing opportunities for that peer interaction and reinforcement and calibration. It can go much further when someone in the class says, wow, your voice sounds great, or boy, I love the way you move so quickly there, versus the instructor saying that. What LOUD for Life and BIG for Life are not is skilled therapy. It's not billed as group therapy. They are not for people who have not yet received LSVT LOUD or LSVT BIG. The reason this is so important is we're not teaching the exercises in the class. The assumption is people already know how to do the exercises, and we're just providing them a means and a motivation for continued practice. It's also not a replacement for their continued daily practice that they need to do to continue that internalization or those tune-ups that I mentioned at the beginning that are so important. We're going to talk very briefly now about what happens in a class. We're not going to go in detail into all the exercises for these. For those of you who are LSVT LOUD or LSVT BIG certified and want to lead a class, we have a whole other course available for you, which provides you every bit of detail and information you need. The first half of an LSVT class, we're doing those daily exercises, those core amplitude building exercises. And we do those together as the group. So we'll do the ahs and the highs and lows and the phrases, always just as we would, listening for that loud, good quality. And the instructor might be providing general models or cues, but it's not a therapeutic intervention. We might add some motor or some cognitive challenges. So when someone can do that loud, good quality with the class, we might have them do different functional movements at the same time, or generate words by category, letter, topic of the day, do different memory tasks, so that we're always adding those dual challenges, just like you would do in therapy. What we constantly remind the class of, though, is that the goal is not that they can do but that they can use that louder voice that we have been practicing in conversation. And I say that over and over and over when I'm leading these classes. The second part of the class involves some sort of communication cognitive activity. These, just like you would do in LSVT loud treatment, are going to be salient. They're going to be focused on what are the goals of your class, what are their hobbies, what are their interests. And we keep these intensive. So we're purposefully structuring the activities so that as many people as possible are talking and keeping that motor practice going. So we do a lot of breaking into smaller groups to keep that motor practice going. Constantly reinforcing that calibration all the way through, and then incorporating home practice competitions. So in my class, we have what we call the gold level competition, and I'll do it for 8 weeks. And then at the end of that 8 weeks, I give prizes for whoever has reached gold level or 80% of practice. For the in-person classes, here's a list of some of the types of activities that we have done that were important and meaningful to people in my class. People like to do impromptu speeches, poetry readings. They were into doing murder mystery parties, solving puzzles. And so it just gives you a few ideas there. I'm going to now turn it over to Laura to give you an overview of what happens in Big for Life.
Hi, everyone. Thank you. So this is a snapshot of what you would typically do in a 1-hour Big for Life class. And just like Angela said, these are clients who already are proficient and have mastered the LSVT big exercises. So that's the first thing we start with, is a full set of what we call the maximal daily exercises, and there are 7 of them. Now, each person may do them differently based on their ability level. There may be some people sitting, some people standing, hanging onto a chair, others that are doing them, freely unsupported. And when they come to class, they generally already know what type of position and support they prefer for safety. After that, in the second half of the session, we really move to functional focused exercises. So we always practice the sit to stand for those who are able to do so. And then every week we vary the type of functional task practice that we're doing. It can be simple things related to mobility, such as turning, stepping through a doorway. It can be ADL related, and we'll get to that a little bit later in these slides. As much as possible, we also do some big walking within the class, whether it's in person or virtually. Now that can be done as a group. Sometimes it is partner practice. It really can vary from session to session based on your group size and your group ability. So on the next slide, you'll see a few pictures of one on the right is of our instructor Jenny doing an exercise called the forward rocking and reaching exercise that everyone does. And as we're doing these exercises, we're constantly reminding our patients and clients, we should call them, that the exercises are wonderful and beneficial for you. But remember, what is the movement or what's the activity that you're going to be doing later today where you can practice using this big effort and this big reach? So it might be cleaning the mirrors or reaching for something in the cupboards, hanging up clothes on the clothesline or in the closet. But we're constantly asking them to think about how can you use these bigger movements in function. On the next slide, you'll see a few pictures of an in-person Big for Life class, and you can see that some of them are sitting, some of them are standing. There's a variety of levels of function, but we want this class to be dynamic and fun. And so it really goes back to the group and what they want to work on in terms of functional practice. So there's a lot of conversation that goes on between the instructor and the participants about, what are the things that you're struggling with this week? What are the things that you want to work on? We make it fun. We add music, music that they want to add to the class if possible. A little bit easier to use music in person than via Zoom, of course. We talked already about reinforcing the why of why you're doing the exercises. Walking can be done together or separately. And just as in Loud for Life, we are also adding in dual task challenges like brain games, different motor and cognitive challenges, while they're always focusing on keeping their movements big. Next slide. So I think we're going to pass it on to Cynthia here.
Yes, yes. All right. So now you've got kind of this overview of what these in-person Loud for Life and Big for Life classes look like, and it's great. I think we can all be excited about it. But what about COVID-19 limitations, which of course we are all dealing with across every element, whether it's our skilled care treatment or our maintenance class exercise classes. That was our impetus for exploring virtual initially, but going beyond that, what about people who live in rural areas, people who do not have access to a Loud for Life or Big for Life class where they live? These classes can be offered virtually. They can reach out to everybody everywhere, and it can be done very effectively. So that brings us to our next objective, which is to explain 4 key logistical components of virtual voice and movement exercise classes. These include considerations such as the web conference platforms, verification of LSVT treatment, the class structure with exercises and interactive activities, and tracking progress and outcomes over time. So the virtual Loud for Life and Big for Life, basically we virtually implement the same class structure as you just heard about in in-person classes. We have the daily exercises, both for Loud and for Big. We translate that into function. We make links to function, and then we do a lot of fun, engaging, motivating activities that the class members decide that they want to do because it's important to them. The rationale for virtual classes, I think, is very straightforward. We're increasing accessibility to having maintenance classes for individuals who've completed LSVT Loud and LSVT Big, enhancing the feasibility of more frequent attendance, and we'll hear more about this. Boost the saliency. They're practicing in their home environment. Using internet, well, the home environment is great because if they say, wow, you know, in-person classes, I could do that, but I really get stuck when I'm actually home, we can watch them at home, and we can, as a group, help them through some of those exercises. And what we found is that using the internet and learning Zoom and getting on things like that actually allows them to expand it beyond the classes and increasing interaction with family or friends. And it diminishes to many degrees the physical and mental burden and fatigue of getting ready to go, driving to clinics or driving to facilities that offer these classes and then getting back home because they just need to get to their computer. The vision for virtual LSVT for Life, and that's sort of the parent name for the 2 subclasses, Loud for Life and Big for Life, is that it's not a substitute, the virtual class, but it's just as good. And for some, it may even be better. So with decreased travel time, the virtual classes can more easily fit into people who have busy schedules. They might be able to participate with increased effort and attentiveness because they're not tired from the travel, or sometimes that travel really brings about anxiety of having to get in the car. Am I going to freeze? What's traffic going to be like? Decreased distractions of the live environment. More time spent on exercises. And so virtually, it's easier to move people around. You don't have to spend that time getting the seats rearranged, moving things, breaking into groups. The virtual process is fast and pretty seamless for the most part. And again, it's a more salient environment because they have access to salient objects within their own home. The other consideration is health and safety. And so right now, as we're in this public health emergency with COVID, obviously the ability to stay home. But even for individuals, you know, once this crisis is over, if perhaps they're not feeling 100% but good enough to exercise, they can still stay home and not expose others to perhaps any germs or things like that that they may be carrying. Okay, platform considerations. These are by platform, it would be the platform for which you're connecting virtually. I think, again, we've all learned a lot about a lot of these platforms, and in some of our other telepractice webinars that we have available for you, we go into a bit more detail about platforms. But ease of use is a consideration, that there's no platform cost for the participants. That is, they're not paying a separate subscription fee to the platform to be able to attend. There's the ability to have breakout rooms. And I think many of the platforms are developing this. If they didn't have it already, of course, Zoom is very well set up for having the breakout rooms. The ability for the organizer, the group leader, to control participants' microphones and videos if necessary, and that the platform itself is HIPAA compliant. Most importantly, there's no ability for other members to record the sessions. We need to verify that participants actually have completed LSVT treatment and have given their consent. This can all be done electronically through a secure portal. Typically, we include things like confirmation of previous LSVT treatment, a consent to class participation, acknowledgement of privacy policies and class conduct, and a liability waiver. And so these are items that we talk about in more detail as we train Loud for Life and Big for Life, but they're important for the virtual environment as well. A little more on privacy and security. As an LSVT for Life group leader, it's our job to protect the privacy of participants' personal health information. Even though this is not considered skilled care, and we're taking off our therapy hat and putting on our exercise leader hat, we will have some access to health information, and we need to protect that. Again, using a secure platform. We also have a privacy code of conduct. This is reviewed at the beginning of every class, both auditorily and visually. You can either hold up the paper with the talking points or share your screen and share the talking points. But for example, this is what we often do for our classes. And we, again, have this visual and auditory, remind our participants, in order to protect the privacy of fellow participants, please do not video record, audio record, take photos, or computer screenshots of the session. Identify anyone else who is in the room with you, especially those that other people cannot see. Do not share information about other people in the session, and agree to not engage in inappropriate behavior or language. Technical support is key as we're doing these virtual platforms, in particular if you're just starting and learning them. Ask people to log in about 5 to 10 minutes early. So that way, if they're having some connection issues, you can manage that. And sometimes that may be done by a support staff of some kind, a volunteer, a student, or an admin assistant. That allows us, when the class starts, to be ready to go. Have someone else run the session as the admin duties in the background. And again, this can be helping people offline if they have problems logging in or problems with audio, visual, so it doesn't disrupt the whole class. We may need to rename people for privacy if that is their wish, handles the chat room, put people in the breakout rooms, and pop in periodically to make sure there's no tech issues, mute and unmute the mic if possible, if as needed, and spotlight the class leader when leading the daily exercises. So some safety considerations as well. Loud for Life, since you cannot assist as needed, have people do motor multitask seated. And this would be when we're trying to challenge them and we're adding perhaps some kind of motor movement. Since we are not there, we don't know their balance, we would want them to do that seated. Big for Life, we've got a few more considerations because we want to be worried about potential fall risks. So if you can have a helper or caregiver, responsible person nearby, encourage exercise in a safe position with adequate support. The clients can opt in and out of activities as they see fit. Consider separate groups for each level of function, activities that are safest and most feasible for the virtual environment, and have a file a policy and plan to how to handle falls. So for example, knowing the address in case you need to activate 911, and do you have an emergency contact person? With that, Angela, it is back to you.
Thank you. We're going to look at now what a virtual Loud for Life class might look like. And in a nutshell, it's the same class structure that you do in person. For the first half of the session, we're doing those 3 daily exercises, the sustained phonation, the highs and lows, the functional phrases. Just like we do in the live class, we're doing these all together to keep that motor practice going. Few things I might do differently with a virtual class. I feel like I model even more with my visual cues because everyone's phonating at the same time. They can see me in the spotlight view. I might use even more finger flicks or things like that to count down the number of seconds that they're supposed to hold out the ah, for example. We're also doing those dual motor cognitive tasks, again, making them salient. So I never want people to think, why is she having me do ah and then do this motor movement? I always say in the real world, you have to think loud and you're moving, or you're thinking about what you want to say and thinking loud. So you show that relation of adding the dual tasks. Some fun things that we've been doing are called national days. So for example, I'll look at what is the national day for a day, and maybe it's National Pie Day. And so as they're doing the ah, they think about as many different kinds of pie as they can. And then I'll go around and call out their name, and they have to say the kind of pie in the same loud voice. And then for the next, I'll say, use those big movements, pretend you're pulling that pie out of the oven. So making those relations. The second half of the session, we're doing conversation cognitive activities, again, that are functional, salient for the group. So what are they interested in? This is where virtually we did have to get a little more creative in how do we keep that motor practice going. And so with Zoom, as many of you may be familiar, you can use breakout rooms. So for the second half, we put people into smaller groups, usually about 3 people in a group. And as an instructor, I can pop in and listen and hear what they're doing. And so this way they get more motor practice than sitting with maybe 18 people in a room. A couple of the highlights from this group that have been really fun that we've done is sharing a treasure. And this is something that's actually easier to do virtually than in person. People were in their homes and took their computers and would show a favorite piece of artwork or a favorite sculpture and then talk about it in their loud voice. We have done sharing a recipe. So everyone put recipes and talked about them, and then we're actually creating a recipe cookbook that's going to be shared amongst everyone else. And then another recent that was a favorite was everybody was a DJ. So they had to come prepared with their favorite song, give a couple intro lines, people had to guess, had a lot of good conversation going with that. So the idea with all these is just keeping people stimulated and talking as much as possible. When we look at some other considerations for the small group breakout rooms, as an instructor, because people will be in the room for a little bit without you as you're hopping in and out, it's important to really set the stage that they're here to help each other. So if someone sounds great, tell them they sound great. Give them that feedback. If someone's quiet, let them know, hey, can you bump it up? I couldn't really hear that. So really enabling and empowering them to help each other. Giving very clear instructions, taking turns so everyone gets that motor practice. And then what we've been doing with our virtual class is I have a range of people in my class. And so some days we have people who are higher level and lower level in the same breakout room together. Some days we have people who are maybe have more cognitive deficits in a room together, the people that are higher cognitive functioning together. So we mix that up really based on the activity and the amount of assistance that people might need. I'm going to turn it over to Laura to talk a little bit about virtual Big for Life now.
All right, thanks, Angela. So in a 1-hour virtual Big for Life practice session, we generally dedicate about 20 to 30 minutes for the LSVT Big exercise practice. They already know how to do the exercises, so no instruction is needed. Really, we're there as coaches to motivate them and to continue to drive their effort and amplitude. The exercises can be adapted to different positions to suit the class's needs. So in our current class, we have some participants that are sitting, some that are standing and hanging onto a chair. And recently, we've divided into two classes, one that has more of a lower level of function, that they adapt the movements, the speed is a bit slower. And then we have a separate class, which is for higher functioning individuals who don't need any balance support and generally can handle more challenges, whether they be motor challenges, balance challenges, dual task challenges, etc. But the same core exercises exist for both groups, whether it is an adapted group or a higher level group. Generally, the instructor is spotlighted during the exercise practice so that the individual practicing can see them in big screen view. Of course, for LSVT Big and Big for Life, we want to see their whole body, and they need to see our whole body as well. That means we have to be approximately 6 feet or more away from the camera. So the instructor might have it in a different view so they can see all of the participants. As we are working on the exercises, we're also adding in salient motor or cognitive dual tasking. So we might be adding arm flicks or hand flicks, resistance challenges, balance challenges, and also cognitive challenges. A recent one that we did in class was related to Thanksgiving. So every time they reached forward or reached to the side, they would have to fill in the blank. So I would say reach for the, and the class would add in what they were reaching for on the Thanksgiving table, like the turkey, the dressing, the gravy, the pie, etc. And we took turns around the group doing that. So that was really fun. After we do the exercises, there's a range of functional practice examples that I've provided here. They can be related to different types of tasks that are important for the group, such as one was gardening, one was going to a sporting event, one was related to different freezing strategies that participants in the group were struggling with at home. It could be related to a holiday like Thanksgiving or going to the movies. So really there's a million ideas, and that is what makes it really fun and dynamic and different from week to week as you practice. Also, in every session, we do a little bit of big walking. So we know that it can be challenging in a virtual environment to do big walking because their space is sometimes limited, as is ours, but nonetheless, it's important, and there's still a lot you can do. You can work on short distances, going all directions, maintaining focus on big posture, big arm swings, big steps. We work on starts and stops and changes of direction on command. Walking in place. So for those that aren't able to walk standing with a walker or anything, they can even march in place in their chair, working on big posture, big arm swings. And then when appropriate, we add in cognitive and motor dual task challenges, such as these examples that I've listed here as well. Okay, so one of the things that you want to think about is how to track progress and outcomes for Big for Life and Loud for Life. And this might be more for your own internal learning, such as we've used it for, and also for the benefit of your participants as well. One thing that can be very valuable is providing some tools and resources so that they can stay motivated and practice their exercises on the days that they're not participating in the group. So it could be as simple as giving them a form so that they can continue to log their daily exercise. If possible, that they could send it to you on a weekly basis for extra accountability. That's always very helpful. We have also recorded extra practice videos that enable clients to go in, watch these videos, participate in a recorded class, and be able to practice some different types of activities that are included in those classes as well. And what we've been doing since this spring is surveying and regularly interviewing the participants for feedback, and that has been extremely helpful for us to shape the classes and make them as meaningful and as useful as possible. So that leads us into the third objective, which is discuss feedback from virtual Loud for Life and virtual Big for Life participants and the potential for interprofessional collaboration for facilities that offer both classes. So in our recent survey, we had 7 people that responded, and Angela and Cynthia will agree that these participants in our classes have just been completely wonderful and generous in giving us feedback, and we feel like they're friends that we look forward to seeing from week to week. So this question was, have your habits of practicing your exercises on your own changed since you began attending Loud for Life or Big for Life virtual classes? 4 of them said it was consistent. They were always good. They're still good. 3 of them said it was better. Thankfully, no one said it was worse. This was a great quote that came from one of them. I've always been pretty good at doing my practicing, but now I very rarely miss a day. So that extra accountability from the group and from the leader, it really does matter. Now, we also asked them what motivates you to come to the classes. And I think this is a really interesting question. And what we found is that the common themes are really reflective of the published studies on the topic of exercise motivators. So you see participating in a group was a good motivator. It really gave them inspiration. One person said, not only that, but my health. They want to stay healthy and desire to stay ahead of Parkinson's, the joy of participating with such an incredible group of individuals who are sharing this journey with me. So you're not alone, right? We help to encourage each other to maintain these practices. And also they just make me smile and I look forward to being together. It's like we've developed an international family. And of course, the therapists who are also so positive, encouraging and challenging us and keeping the classes fun. And those bolded words are exactly those words that were picked up on in those previous studies on exercise motivators. Now, on the next slide, you'll see what would you like LSVT graduates who have not joined to know about the classes. And we love this quote from one of our participants that said, as a motivated person who faithfully did my LSVT big exercises daily for years by myself, I thought I was doing fine. However, the energy of the class and the camaraderie of the participants makes the exercises much more fun. And furthermore, I'm continually learning from expert instructors, thereby significantly improving the quality and energy of my daily exercises. On the next slide, the next question you'll see was, what is the most unexpected outcome from being part of a Loud for Life or Big for Life class? And this was actually the same participant as in the previous quote. He said, I'm surprised how much I enjoy in this virtual format the camaraderie with the class and instructors. In addition to the many Parkinson-specific exercise benefits of the class, I really enjoy being part of this group from people from all over the country, exercising together and sharing thoughts, insights, and experiences. We also asked them, do you feel you are likely to attend a virtual class with the same frequency or with more or less frequency than a live class? And this was really varied, actually. A lot of people, because of COVID, really have been forced into virtual live classes. And so for some of them, they think, it's a toss-up for me. It's convenient to do the virtual live class, but they might have a little more motivation and personal touch in a live class, in-person class. So that person said they would do it with both the same frequency. The next quote says, I am more likely to attend virtual classes due to ease of attendance, the evolution of technology in facilitating the class experience, the safety aspects because of the pandemic, driving, not necessarily having to do that any longer, and it provides an opportunity to meet, interact with people outside of my current geographical boundaries. And our current classes, we do indeed have international participants. And the last quote I think is also really interesting. This is a person that kind of switched their mindset. He said, now that I am more comfortable with a virtual format, I would probably attend the virtual class more frequently than a live class. Previously, I might have underestimated the personal feel of the virtual class, but with a virtual format, there's no travel time to and from class, and things like weather, appointments, etc. don't get in the way. And lastly, we feel that there's opportunities for increased interprofessional collaboration for those of you who have both Big for Life and Loud for Life in your organization who are considering that in the future. You can share themes every week, so you can all have a Thanksgiving theme, for example. One's working on communication, one's working on the mobility aspects. Oftentimes you have shared clients who see each other in both classes, and that really helps to not only encourage each other, but reinforce calibration as well, that, hey, not only are you moving great this week, you're speaking loud as well. You sound awesome. Through word of mouth, the clients themselves promote holistic therapy. So what we've noticed in our classes is that some of them have done both therapies, and some of the clients have only done one or the other. And they begin to talk and share how much they benefited from doing both therapies. And that's really what we desire for our patients as well, that they have the opportunity to improve not only their voice, but also their movement. In the future, we think it would be a really interesting direction to combine Loud for Life and Big for Life classes, so that they're really engaging at a high level of moving big, talking loud the entire session. So in summary, we have defined voice and movement maintenance exercise classes for people with Parkinson's disease, and we've explained 4 key logistical components of virtual voice and movement exercise classes, including web conference platforms, verification of LSVT treatments, class structure with exercises and interactive activities, and tracking progress and outcomes. And we've discussed feedback from virtual Loud for Life and Big for Life participants and the potential for interprofessional collaboration for facilities that offer both classes. So with that, I'm going to turn it back to Cynthia.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Angela. I just love that feedback from the participants. It really is so insightful. And I remember as I read through it, one of the participants saying how she loved the class so much, but she was always sad when it was over because she knew she had to wait a whole nother week before another class was held. So I think it tells us we need more frequent classes, perhaps. Anyway, before we get to the questions, and feel free to start typing those in, and we have some time for questions. Just a reminder of our schedule. We have 2 more presentations slated for tomorrow, starting at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. We have improved verb use following intensive voice treatment in individuals with Parkinson's disease, presented by Dr. Amy Ramage. And then at 11:30 Eastern, we have building a database for automatic speech recognition in Parkinson's disease. This will be talking about Project Euphonia, and we have Dr. Lorraine Ramick, Dr. Bob McDonald, as well as one of our LSVT LOUD expert clinicians, Heather Hodges, who will be sharing the very exciting information about that project. All of these presentations will be available on demand. So if there's something you see that you missed, but you'd like to see it, we will have those up and posted in our public blog next week. So now for questions, and I've seen some come through. So let's begin. And Laura, I'm going to punt the first question to you, which I think is a great one.
All right.
Regarding Big for Life, do you have tips to assist participants who have some level of visual impairment?
I think that's a really interesting question. Well, first of all, I would hope that through the 16 visits of LSVT Big and through lots of hands-on shaping from that therapist, the patient would have really become a master and memorize the movements, so that as they're participating in Big for Life, they know how to do those exercises. And as the group leader is giving some simple verbal cues, such as, out big, down big, up big, that participant knows exactly what he or she is referring to. For the functional activities, it might require some description of exactly what the functional activity is that they're doing if they're not able to see at all. However, if you're LSVT Big certified, you know that the cues are very simple. So for example, if the class is working on crossing their leg to be able to put on their shoe, it's really, okay, here's the next functional activity. We're going to work on crossing your leg so that your ankle is up on your knee, and we're all going to do 5 times with huge effort, big movement. And so I think in that way you can keep it simple. If the client would need a caregiver to come in and be there to help a little bit with spotting, or giving some physical direction to the client, that might be also something that you could consider.
Excellent, thank you. Angela, a quick one for you. Is data taken during the LSVT LOUD classes? And I'm assuming the references to something like SPL, kind of our classic treatment acoustic data.
You are not collecting data. It's meant to just be exercise practice. It's not a therapeutic session. So unlike your LSVT LOUD treatment session where you are getting that data, no, in the group class, you're not collecting it. And as we know, as LSVT LOUD certified clinicians, our ear is always our best clinical tool. And so when you're leading the class, you're always listening for loudness with good quality, loudness with healthy voice quality. You're providing general shaping and modeling to the entire class, but it's not that specific intervention.
Great, and a follow-up to that I'll let you both respond to, or one of you can take it. If they are considered exercise and not therapy, what implications does that have for financial assistance or external funding?
Well, I can talk about a few of the models I know of how it's handled financially, and then Laura, if you want to chime in for other things. Mm-hmm. I know that some Parkinson's associations, they will have a class as a part of their mini exercise classes. Maybe they offer a Tai Chi class and they offer a Loud for Life class. And so in some of those situations, it's handled as a fee for each class. Some I've heard have been $5 per person per session. Some do a donation. So they may email people and say, hey, you've attended 10 classes. Would you like to make a donation to the association? Those are a couple different models when it's more organizational based. Laura, do you want to talk about your experience or what you've heard from hospital based who are offering classes?
Mm-hmm.
Or outpatient facilities?
Sure. So I think there's a range as well, and it really depends. It's a decision locally from that Big for Life provider and whoever their boss is. I think there are probably some classes that are no cost because they're, self-funded by the organization themselves, or they've received a grant from Parkinson's foundations or organizations. I've seen both of those models happen. Typically, it's a cash-based class where the Big for Life provider is really looking at what is their break-even point to be able to lead the class and, not lose any money as a therapist who could otherwise be billing hours. Some therapists are doing it after work hours on their own and just billing whatever it takes to cover their costs to provide the class. And typically, it's around $5 to $10 per class. Some are doing monthly models. Some are doing booklets of, punch cards, that kind of thing. So it really does vary from what I've seen.
Great, thank you. Next question, for a combination group class, let's say in the future, would we extend the time of the class to be sure we address both loud and big tasks?
I can start with that. I'd love to know Angela's perspective too, but my take on that would be no, that it would be a class that's all dual tasking. So as they're doing their LSVT big exercises, they would be working on their ahs, their highs and their lows, their functional phrases, that they would be all integrated together throughout the hour. Also, when they're working on functional activities related to mobility or ADLs, they would be working on speech and communication exercises at the same time.
I would agree with that, and I would see it as a continuum or a platter of things that are offered. If people have done both LSVT Loud and LSVT Big, maybe they want to do this combination, Loud for Life and Big for Life. And this is something we need to continue to develop. We don't really have that model in place at the moment. Some ideas that we're looking forward to, and then perhaps the facility would have a class like that, but they would also have a Loud for Life specific class and a Big for Life specific class. And then people could decide, one day I want to go to the combo class. One day, I feel like I'm really forgetting exactly how much amplitude to use in my movements. I'm going to go to this Big for Life specific.
Excellent. Just as a program note, we are at the top of the hour, so if you need to log off, you are welcome to do so. You have completed your CE requirement. A reminder, the survey should launch automatically. If it fails to launch, you will receive an email in about 1 hour that will also have a link to the survey, or you can request that survey at any time. We do still have a few more questions, so we will stay on and answer more if you'd like to stay on and continue the conversation. Okay, question. I'm not sure I know the answer, but maybe one of you do. What is the maximum number of breakout rooms Zoom allows?
It's a lot. I think
it's a lot, I think.
I think it's over 50.
Right. We've not maxed it out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Excellent. Angela, for sessions run by SLPs only, to what extent is it appropriate to incorporate motor task? And I think the issue here is safety. Should you keep it seated only?
I can tell you, as a speech language pathologist leading a LOUD for Life class, I'm very cautious about that. Even if I was one-on-one with someone, I'm cautious about that because I'm a speech language pathologist, and I'm focusing on the voice, and I don't have all those skills that Laura has for the physical therapy. With the class also, because there's so many people, you can't, in talking about in person, you can't be right next to everybody. I tend to default to mostly seated exercises. There have been a few times when I've had maybe a smaller group and I know all these people are actively doing very physical, other types of exercise, hiking 14ers and stuff. And in those cases, maybe I would do something seated, but I think I probably tend to be even more cautious than a physical or occupational therapist would be, just to default on that side of caution. And then another thing that I've learned from Laura is making some of those general statements of, sometimes as SLPs, we don't think about things beyond Parkinson's. So what if someone has a shoulder injury? What if someone has something else going on? So I make general statements, even if we're doing arm movements of, if you have any issues with your shoulder or there's any pain, don't do this, you can adapt, that sort of thing.
Great.
Well, I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
I think in a class like LOUD for Life and Big for Life, it's an exercise class, it's not therapy. And to some extent, I think the onus is on the clients who sign up and read the liability waiver and agree to take responsibility for themselves. So I think we do our best to do activities that are safe, but if there are participants that are, really high functioning, early PD, I guess my thought would be if they want to do some things in standing, I don't have a problem with that if they're willing and, capable and competent to take responsibility for themselves.
Great. Next question. Before allowing someone to participate in your maintenance group, what is the maximum amount of time since their completion of LSVT LOUD or LSVT BIG that you allow for? And I think a follow-up to that I'll add is, when do you refer back to therapy and it's no longer exercise? So Angela, you want to take a first pass and then we'll follow up with Laura.
Sure. So when we go through and if you take a LOUD for Life or Big for Life course, we have tried to provide you all of these steps and logistics, but we actually have options of different types of screenings that you can do. So I'll use, when I have a class, if someone wants to join the class, I have a phone screening. I'm going through, how long has it been? Have you noticed any sudden changes in voice and speech since? And so you're looking at each one individually as you evaluate the needs. Now, I have had people who have come to class that it's been quite a while, and in those situations, what I will say is, when was the last time you had a tune-up with your LSVT LOUD therapist? And if it's been a long time, I will tell them they should go back and simultaneously be getting some tune-up sessions from an LSVT LOUD therapist. Maybe they don't have one anymore, so then I can give them referral information to other LSVT LOUD therapists. And if there's something, though, that someone is having more acute problems, so say they say, I had LSVT LOUD 2 years ago, but then about 6 months ago, boy, I had this sudden onset of hoarseness. In those situations, I don't want to say, get a tune-up and start coming to class. I'll say, you know, you really need to see the speech therapist first, figure out what's going on with your voice, do some one-on-one therapy. And then when that person feels it's appropriate and you're stable and, you know, everything's back to where it needs to be, then you can come back to the class. So it's really going to be individual based on the person. And then the follow-up to Cynthia's question about in class is very similar. So if I'm working with someone and it's been a while since they've had a tune-up, I frequently remind people in my class, if it's been more than 6 months, contact your LSVT LOUD therapist. If you need help finding someone, I'll help you. Likewise, if someone comes to class, sudden change in voice and speech, maybe they had a cold or something like that, I'll suggest go to see a speech therapist before you join back in the class.
Great. Laura?
Yeah, really parallel answer to you as well. And we do address this topic a little bit more in depth in our Big for Life and Loud for Life training courses that we have that are online courses. But really, we also engage and look at the individuals that they're participating. And if we see individuals that are really struggling, don't seem to understand the exercises, are struggling to do them, that might be a recommendation that we give on the side is, hey, when's the last time that you had a tune-up? And have you thought about going back for a tune-up with your with your LSVT Big certified clinician? Also, we just give frequent reminders in the class that, just like Angela was saying, that, hey, thanks for joining. Remember, if it's coming up on time for your tune-up, it's just like it's time for your 6-month dental checkup. Schedule that visit. A new year is coming.
Great. Well, we have one final question before we close out the session, and that is, how are you marketing these groups, and more broadly, how are these groups being marketed? So, Laura, you want to take the first pass at that, and we'll follow up with Angela.
Sure. So I think there's, we can answer this in two different ways. Big for Life and Loud for Life are advanced trainings that any LSVT Big or LSVT Loud certified clinician can take. After they take the Big for Life or Loud for Life course, they can be listed on our clinician directory as a Big for Life or a Loud for Life provider. And that itself is a way of individually marketing their Big for Life or Loud for Life group in their community, or maybe they're doing it virtually. In the course, we also give them some ideas of promotional materials, ways that they can reach out to support groups locally to advertise their Big for Life or Loud for Life groups. What we've been doing for our virtual LSVT hosted Loud for Life and Big for Life groups is several different things. Some of it is word of mouth. We have information on our blog, and we're currently in the process of building a website where really anyone can log in and learn about what these virtual classes are and how they can participate in them, regardless of if they live in the United States or somewhere overseas. And Angela, what else would you like to add to that?
Oh, it was very comprehensive. And, you know, we really looked at this as not an either or. So maybe you're a Big for Life or Loud for Life provider and you have a class that you're doing in person or virtually. And then, you know, maybe somebody wants to go to class 3 times a week. And so they could also come and join an LSVT Global class. So we want to see this as really a continuum to meet everyone's needs. That international part has been a piece we didn't think about so much ahead of time. That's been great fun. I know in the Loud for Life class, we have someone from Beirut, we have someone from Zimbabwe, we have someone from England, from the UK. So it's really been fun for everyone. We've had a lot of great cultural discussions in their loud voices as they get to know each other.
That's excellent. I agree. I think the international component has been so fun, and we're certainly going to start building out local national ones for languages, so that our French individuals who've completed LSVT Loud or LSVT Big can have their French-speaking groups. So it's great. Well, we are finished up our questions. I thank you, Laura and Angela, for your wonderful insights. And we thank all of you for attending. Just a reminder, if you want this reported to ASHA for the CE registry, complete that survey. And we hope to see some of you tomorrow for our remaining 2 presentations as part of our mini conference. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.